All right, so we were talking about your process for doing the songs on The Simpsons. Let's elaborate on that a little bit.
Creating the songs for The Simpsons is a bit different than creating the score. The score music is recorded usually about a week and a half ahead of the air date, whereas the songs are created 7 to 8 months ahead of the air date. The songs are usually born out of something in the script, which usually tends to move the story ahead. What I will get from the producers is a lyric sheet that's incorporated as part of the script. They'll fax me the lyrics. I'll have a phone conversation with the showrunner, the guy who's written the lyrics, and anybody else who would like to contribute ideas. We have a chat about what they want out of me from the song. Once I have got that figured out, they send me on my way, and I go back into my studio and start writing. And it usually takes, with any amount of luck, maybe 2 to 3 days to write the song the way I'm satisfied with it. So once it's written, I will then record it in the studio with a small group of players, whether it be a solo piano or piano, bass, guitar, and drums, just to give the producers an idea of the rhythmic impetus of the song. We'll then, once we've recorded those tracks, we then bring in studio singers, and I'll record the melodies and harmonies with the studio singers to let them know how it's supposed to go. We give CDs to everybody involved so they can put in their 2 cents. We give CDs to the singers so they can hear how the song's supposed to be phrased. With any amount of luck, they'll actually listen to it before their recording session. Not always, I might add. That's the ideal situation, that they do listen to it so they have an idea of what the style is. The cast voices are then recorded onto the instrumental tracks if the cast voices are involved. Once we have that all taken care of, we make a composite mix of the vocal parts, the instrumental parts, and a click track, which is a metronome. It's the equivalent of a metronome that everybody marches to in the studio so that the tempo stays the same for every process of the recording. We make a composite mix of that, send it off to the animators, and the animators do their thing. They animate to the songs as opposed to the other way around. They will take about 7 months, 8 months, something like that, to do their animation until the songs come back in the episode in which they're featured. And normally what happens in that amount of time, I've forgotten about the songs because so many more episodes have crossed my brain. And then all of a sudden it comes back and I say, did we record that? I don't remember that. Oh yeah, I guess I did do that, didn't I? So once we do that, I have one more chance to add my musical frosting on the cake by throwing away the rhythm section track and replacing it with a full orchestra track. So if I do it correctly, it will sound like the song has been accompanied by this orchestral track from the very beginning of its birth, like a Broadway show type of song feature or whatever the focus may be. So once we get the orchestral track recorded, usually as part of the scoring session for the episode to keep the cost down, the dub will then be done and the song will be inserted into the dub. Everybody is happy, and it's sent out to the air.
So you don't work directly with the cast members for their
Normally
songs?
not, and the reason is that I can't be in 2 places at once. Very oftentimes I'm in my studio working on a song where we're doing a scoring session and the song is being recorded at the same time. So my music editor, fortunately, who has a degree in conducting, will conduct the cast voices for me, which is very handy because I can't be in 2 places at once.
Have you ever worked directly with the guest stars for their musical spots? You mentioned Tito Puente.
I have. The most interesting time was with U2. That was just quite a day to behold, I'll tell you. We knew they were coming in. They were scheduled to come in and record, first of all, their lines from the script on the scoring stage at the Simpsons, or at the Fox scoring stage. And then when they were done with their lines, then they would sing the lines from the song that I wrote for them called The Garbage Man. And we went into the studio to listen to the lines being recorded, and as we're in the studio, the booth starts to fill up with more and more people. And we have people from all walks of the entertainment business, including U2's management, U2's legal team, the music department at Fox, the music department legal team at Fox, the producers, the production assistants. It started filling up, and we had about 80 people in the booth for this particular session. It was like a little daunting, you know. So we started to record the song lines, and we got through one take of it, and my engineer was engineering the session, and I was down at the recording board with him, and I got on the talkback as soon as we did the first take, and I said to Bono, I said, that was really great. I said, you know, but I think you can do a better one. Let's do another one. And I hear a collective in the booth, like all the air is being sucked out of the booth by all these people who were gasping, that I dared to tell Bono that he might be able to do a better take, because they didn't understand the process by which we make records. And Bono understood, and we got along great. He was just fine. But all the other folks, the peripheral folks, were just so taken aback by this whole thing that I would dare do that. But once they settled down, we did another take or two or three or four until we got it exactly the way we wanted it. And then everybody was happy, and happy, we went home.
Do you have any favorite Simpsons songs?
I love Senor Burns. I love the Stonecutter song, We Do.
Why?
It was one of those songs that was more fun for me than usual in that I had nothing to parody. It was totally original. And those are much more fun for me creatively. I don't like following in somebody's footsteps when I'm doing parodies like that. It's not as easy a task as one might think. In this particular case, it was much easier, much more fun. It kind of brought me back to my high school days growing up when I was a member of D-Malay back in Jamestown, North Dakota. And D-Malay was an organization of young people that was sponsored by an organization of old people. I can't remember the name of the organization, my goodness. That'll come back to me in a minute or two. It was one of those situations where they had a big meeting room, they had rules to follow, procedures to follow. I always thought it was a little bit strange, but I did it anyway just to have another credit on my belt for doing something during high school. Yeah, but it was very much like the Stonecutters. It was kind of weird, and so it kind of brought me back for the moment, and I got a kind of a chuckle out of the fact that I could actually do that after all these years.
Mm-hmm. So you've mentioned several members of your team at The Simpsons, and your sons Scott and Kyle have both worked with you on the show.
Right.
What's it like to work with them?
I've said to a couple of folks fairly early on in the process, when Scott and I were working together, I said, it's really cool now because he has to listen to me. It's such an opportunity. It doesn't come along very often. And we've had a really good time together working in the studio. And some of the issues that we may have had through the years, like fathers and sons have, kind of have dissipated because of the fact that we're in this creative environment, and it's more important to focus on the creation of the moment, so to speak, rather than carry grudges or whatever. So that's been kind of fun. Kyle was the same way. Kyle's a little bit different personality. He's a little bit more low key. He came in just a couple of times, and at this point he's working as a music editor for composer Brian Tyler, who does a lot of big blockbuster features in town. And Kyle is a music editor with Brian and having a great time on that job. They've actually gone to London to record a couple of times. They walked on the the Walk of Fame that the Beatles walked on, and he got his picture taken with the rest of the crew members on that sidewalk, which was a lot of fun. So he's settled in motion pictures, where Scott has settled not only as an orchestrator on The Simpsons, but he's had many of his own shows on the air, television shows, usually half-hour sitcoms. So I'm proud of both of them, for hanging in there and doing all this stuff.
So let's talk a little more in depth about the recording process on The Simpsons.
Oh, and before I do that, I'm sorry. I also should talk about my daughter, Karen, who has kind of grown up in the entertainment world, but is now living in New Hampshire. But she found a job working for a film producer, a documentary producer in New Hampshire. And they really like each other, and he hired her, and she's been working for him for several years now. And so it's really a fun situation for her, because normally in New Hampshire, you ain't going to find that. You know what I'm saying? It's not going to help. It's just not going to happen. But it did, and she's doing well.
That's great.
All right, on we can go.
So we want to just talk about the recording process on The Simpsons. You said is that Friday night that the session
Usually,
happens?
yeah. Friday afternoons or Friday night.
So take us through what that session looks like.
Well, the recording session on The Simpsons is where this all starts to come together and where all the magic starts to happen, so to speak. I absolutely love the process. It's one of the reasons I got into this in the first place. When you're writing for a live orchestra as a composer, there are certain consolations you find you must make from the standpoint that writing out in the open air, instruments such as, let's say, the flute or the clarinet don't have the carrying power that they normally would have in the recording studio when you have a microphone right by them like this. So it's more difficult writing in a live situation to realize the intent of what your music is really about. But in the recording studio, it's a lovely place to work. And now my flute player can just simply play here, and the sound will be, if it's a solo flute, it'll like fill the whole room, and it's just absolutely glorious when it happens. So the recording process is, to me, a joy. I really, really enjoy doing that. We will put a call out to an average of 35 musicians per week. I'm very organized. I have a list of the musicians that I want called in the order in which I want them called and what instruments they play, and I give that to my contractor, and he puts the call out for the musicians to see who's available. They're not all available all the time because they're freelance, and sometimes they'll get called to work on a motion picture for 3 days and they're not available. So then I go to level number 2, level number 3. The fortunate thing about living in Los Angeles is the depth of players is unbelievable. It's just amazing. So it's literally impossible to call a bad orchestra here, as long as you know what you're doing. So we have 35 people in the studio, and we start recording with the cues, the music cues that have the most instruments first. And we work our way down the size of the orchestra, getting less and less and less. The reason for doing that is in case we have to go into overtime, we go into overtime with the fewer amount of instruments as possible. We record about 30 cues in, give or take 3.5 hours, something like that. The musicians have never seen this music before. They walk into the studio and this is all fresh to them. And we'll spit them out one after another, and the process is rehearse them a couple of times so that the orchestra gets used to them. Maybe rehearse another one or two times so that the orchestra gets more in tune. We make recordings, a couple of recordings in a row, maybe 3 recordings in a row. Normally that's enough to move on and do the next one, and we go very quickly. The elephant in the room is the budget. I'm always the slave to the budget, and I have to be very careful with that to make sure that I stay within the parameters that I've been given. I have to give the Simpsons folks credits that they really never say anything to me about the budget. I'm really honored that way, and that's one of the reasons I take care of it, to make sure that I don't overstep my bounds with them. And then they'll start to pull me back and say, well, you know, if you're going to need that kind of money, we don't have that kind of money, and we don't even have the kind of money that we gave you before. We're going to take some of it away now. So I have to be very careful about that. We record, as I say, 35 cues in 3.5 hours. Historically, in a recording session, we all kind of laugh about this. We'll come upon one cue that we just cannot get right. It's either out of tune, or it's not together, or who knows what. We call it the cue that will not die. And so after going over it maybe 10 times and it not happening, I will stop it, put it aside, we'll move on, we'll start to record others, and everything is fine until we get closer to the end of the process. I say, okay, let's try this one again. And usually without fail, we'll record that cue on the first take and it'll be perfect. It's the weirdest thing. But it's all part of the recording process. We record on a system called Pro Tools, which is now the standard recording device in the industry now. My music editor runs the Pro Tools system. Once we finish, he does whatever small amount of mixing that he has to do. He will actually run a tape, electronic copy of what we have just recorded. The entire show fits on a hard drive this size. It's scary these days what's going on. We always have a backup, so he records a backup on a hard drive this size. He gives me the hard drive and I bring him home with me to make sure that we always have a backup in case he gets in an auto accident, God forbid, or whatever it would be. We have a backup of the show. So that's the deal.
That's great. So have you guys used kind of a full orchestra from the beginning?
We have. Matt Groening has been the impetus behind that. He feels that a live orchestra tends to smooth out the animation. And he says that because in our time constraints, sometimes the animation tends to come back a little bit rough. And so he feels that the live orchestra smooths out those bumps and makes it more listenable.
So have you ever used synthesizers or anything like that then?
I have 2 keyboard players inside the orchestra, both of whom play synthesizers, one of whom plays piano. So if I need synthesized parts, I have them there as part of the orchestra. As far as doing complete cues with synthesizers, I usually don't do that because Matt Groening hates it.
So he's the reason you guys have not gone to digital music when so many other shows have.
I mean, it's very interesting because my music editor will go to the dub and Matt will walk in and he'll start listening to the playback and he'll say, wait a minute, what's that? And Chris will say, well, that's da-da-da-da-da-da, you know, and Matt will say, is that synthesizers? And Chris will say yes, and Matt says, I hate that. Do we have a substitute for that? So Chris has to go into the library and find something of an acoustic nature to substitute for the synthesizer cue that he doesn't care for, even though that might be a parody of something synthesized that we pulled that he didn't know about because he wasn't at the music spotting session. So there's a lot of parameters going on, a lot of political stuff going on you have to deal with.
Do you always conduct the orchestra?
I conducted for many, many years up until maybe, I don't know what it was, 2 or 3 years ago perhaps, and I got stuck with something called frozen shoulder. And frozen shoulder is an affliction that the doctors don't know what causes it. They don't know what causes it to go away. They just know that it lasts anywhere from 18 to 24 months. And it's very painful and inconvenient, and so I had to stop conducting. And I started producing from the booth, which I actually found advantageous because I could hear the music as it was being recorded, the way it sounds in the booth, and I can pass on the cue, or I can say, no, we have to do it again, rather than conducting the 50-minute session, coming in on a 10-minute break and listening to all the cues, and if there's something that needs to be redone, going back into the studio and redoing it, as opposed to being able to call it right there, saying, we need to redo this, let's do that and move on. So it's a time saver. So I kind of like being in the booth.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoy conducting. I enjoy the camaraderie with the musicians and the humor. There's nothing like musicians' humor. And I miss that part of the conducting process, but it's a lot easier in the booth.
And where do these sessions take place?
Usually at 20th Century Fox on the soundstage there, over in Century City.
Mm-hmm. So we've mentioned a few of the notable episodes of The Simpsons. I wanted to just touch on a few more. Bart After Dark. What do you recall from the music of that episode?
Nothing.
Had the We Put the Spring in Springfield song in it.
We Put the Spring in Springfield is a song that was written because of the fact that the town's house of ill repute was about to be torn down. It's the Maison Derrière. And of course, Bart has an after-school job there. So the townsfolk want to tear this place down, and Homer wants to keep it up because he knows that Bart's working there. So they have this song, and basically it makes one side against the other, and Homer's trying to sell everybody on the idea that they should keep this house of ill repute going. And it's, besides being an Emmy winner, it's the song that had the most characters in it. Of all the songs we've done, it had 17 characters. Wow. And so it was a chore to write this song, because what I have to do when I write it is not only do I have to match the lyric with a melody and a rhythm, but I have to write the song in the space of what the character is going to sing in. In other words, the character is going to sing in a certain key. And I have to know what the character's range is so that I can write a phrase in that character's range. And when you've got 17 of them, that's a lot to do, to try to make them all work like that. So that's challenging. But it was fun. It was, I'm really pleased with the way it turned out, and Homer was very convincing, and who was it, Flanders, who said, I'm convinced the house stays. So it worked.
Mm-hmm. Another one was The City of New York versus Homer Simpson, which had the song You're Checking In.
There I am. Okay, I'm
Mm-hmm,
back.
mm-hmm.
I'm back. He's back. The Simpsons go to New York City. Mm-hmm. And Marge has this famous line, which I just love, where she says, all my life I've dreamed of being in a Broadway audience, which is about the height of Marge's sophistication. So I wrote the song that they play in the theater when they went to see this musical. And the song's called You're Checking In, and it's a story of the musical treatment of the Betty Ford Center. And another Emmy winner, by the way, I might add. Very happy with the way that turned out. Mm-hmm. So the song itself was kind of crafted twofold. Part of it was Stephen Sondheimish, and part of it was the other big musical guy who writes blockbusters. Oh my God, I can't believe it. Come back to me, Alf. It'll come back to me in a minute. So the Stephen Sondheimish part of it was more quirky and kind of left-handed, the way Stephen Sondheim likes to write. And he's one of my heroes. I just love what he does. And the other part of it was more mundane, shall I say, and more accessible to the general public. And it's a weird combination of putting these two people together, but it worked. Somehow or another, it worked.
And then the show reached its 500th episode in 2012. Talk about what it was like to reach that milestone.
I'm tired. Yeah, what an amazing thing to be celebrating. You know, it's whoever would have guessed? It's just crazy how time has flown and how many episodes have flown by and how little I remember of them.
Was there anything special done for that episode?
I had a cake.
That's good.
Yeah, I had a cake.
Cake is good.
And we celebrated with the orchestra. Let them eat cake, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It was good.
Are there any other favorite episodes or episodes that stand out for you?
Well, we did this special thing this last year called Musicville, which was a takeoff on an old Disney short. And it was about a little over a minute and a half long. And it was just a remarkable piece of animation, and I had to write some really quirky music for it, and the logistics of just getting through it were really daunting. That was fun, and I love the way it turned out, and it's one of those pieces that has a real wow factor to it. You know, you listen to it, and the first thing you want to say is, wow, that was really something. So that's fun.
Mm-hmm.
As I say, they all blend into one another. It's tough to sort them out now.
You mentioned you've won 2 Primetime Emmy Awards for Outstanding Music and Lyrics. We just mentioned a couple of those songs.
Right.
How do those honors feel?
Oh, that's great, because it's the nice thing about the Emmys is that it's a vote of your peers. You know, it's not like the Motion Picture Academy where everybody gets to vote. This is the best way to have it happen, and I'm really honored. It's really a pleasure.
You've been involved with several Simpsons albums as well. Tell us about those.
As the show count continued to escalate, we have more and more music, and we get more and more requests for releasing some of it on CD. It took some time to get everybody's attention on the production to try to get them into the thought of doing that. I finally was able, after doing multiple pitches to multiple record companies and getting multiple turndowns, I was finally able to call my agent and say, do you know anybody who has a record company who might want to do this? I can't believe that I'm getting these refusals to do soundtrack on the Simpsons songs. He said, let me call my friend Bob Emmer over at Rhino and see what their story is. So he called Bob, and he had Bob call me back, and Bob Emmer said, I would love to do this. When do we start? And it was a very astute observation on Bob's part. He was a big Simpsons fan, and he knew that it was going to be successful. So we got together and started assembling things and making lists of what do we include and what we do not include and all of that. And little by little got it together and got them released. The first one, Songs in the Key of Springfield, sold over 400,000 copies. This is the house that Bart built, by the way. The second one, which is Go Simpsonic with the Simpsons, sold over 100,000, which historically, according to Bob, sequels do less than the original. And then we have a third one called Simpsons Testify, which has done very well in addition. So now the rafters are beginning to get rattled a little bit with people who want a score album, which is more difficult because a lot of the music cues are quite short, as you know, and it's very difficult to find a way to string them all together into making some musical sense. So we'll just have to see how that all develops. It's not done yet. But the other ones were very satisfying, and I'm very proud of them. I thought they turned out very well. And, you know, the thought of moms picking their kids up from school and playing the CDs in the car until they get home, and the kids knowing all of the lyrics and the melodies and all that stuff. That's what's going to be cooler than that? How fun that is.
Yeah. You also wrote music for the Simpsons theme park in Australia.
Oh,
Tell us about
did.
that.
I forgot about that. That's what I can tell you about that. I seem to remember that place didn't last very long. I don't know for sure, but that's what my memory tells me.
Mm-hmm.
And there wasn't a lot of music involved either. I don't remember much about it.
Will you ever leave the show?
Leave? Moi? I don't know. I don't think so. I've thought long and hard about it. Part of me says I'm getting more tired and it's more and more difficult to get through the week's pressures. On the other hand, I like to say that I'd like to ride this stage into the sunset and say that I finished this. That being said, the damn thing will never stop. So I don't know. I don't know what to say. It's still remarkably creative. I know that I would never find another job like this that would be this creative for this consistent amount of time. And there's a lot to be said for that. The only show that I know that could even come close to this musically creative is Moonlighting. And that's not going to happen again. So where does that leave me? So that's a long answer to a short question.
Now, you've composed for several other projects while you've been composing for The Simpsons. In 1994, you became the composer for The Critic.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about how that came about.
Well, the Critic was very nicely, I might say, offered to me by Al Jean and Mike Reiss from The Simpsons, and they created that show for John Lovitz. And it lasted for, did it last for a season? 2 seasons? I can't remember. It might have been a season.
23.
Or 2.
2 seasons,
2 seasons, yeah. So it featured John Lovitz as the critic. His byline was, "It stinks." And Al and Mike wanted the same sound and the same orchestral makeup that I had on The Simpsons, so I got 35 players again. And their blessing, and I wrote a few songs for the show. I'm sorry to see it disappear because it was fun while it lasted. I remember that I think between The Simpsons and The Critic, I worked 35 weeks in a row, and I swore I'd never do that again because it just about killed me. But boy, was it fun.
So let's talk a little bit more in depth about scoring for television. In general, what are the challenges of underscoring a scene with dialogue?
Staying out of the way. I learned very early on that one must have a very healthy respect for dialogue. And if you don't, you really shouldn't do this job. It's all about the written word and the performed word. And what we talked a little bit earlier on about the fact that as underscore composers, we're meant to be not heard very oftentimes. I have this scenario that I talk to friends about occasionally about the fact that I'm one of the luckiest guys in the entertainment business in what I have to deal with, in that the episode always starts with the script. And if the script is great, it's recorded by the actors. And if the actors put the right spin on the script and the actors are great, the level gets knocked up farther. The episode is sent to the animators, and if the animators really tune into what has happened with the script and the actors and the animators understand what's going on emotionally in the episode, the animators get their chance to move it up another notch, and I and the sound effects guy are at the end of the process, so I basically get it at the end of the process. And if all of those areas have done their correct due, so to speak, on their challenge, I get one more chance to add my 2 cents to it. As I said, put the frosting on the cake. And if I've done it correctly, and if I've tuned into the dialogue correctly, which is my point now of tuning into the dialogue, I will hopefully have written something that is sympathetic to the dialogue, and which, when I take into the studio and record it, if I do it correctly, I'll get chills up my spine, chills up my arm when I do this recording. And it's really moving to me, because I know that if I come back to that same place later on in that same cue and listen to that same place, I will get chills in my arm all over again. The chills go along with the recorded sound. It's an amazing process, and I can't think of any other art form where you can actually do that. Painting is great, absolutely lovely. Sculpture is fine, absolutely lovely, but this is like the human emotion at its best. And it doesn't get any better than that, And I can go back and I can listen to that cue 10 years later, and I'll get chills on my arm again when that happens. I said, "Oh, leave me alone," It's wonderful. It's just absolutely incredible.
How much research do you typically do for a composition?
Very little now, fortunately. I've had the good fortune of being involved in so many different kinds of projects stylistically, and have stolen from the best and put it all up here, that when we get to the spotting session and there's a style at which might be questionable, most of the time I can say, yeah, I can do that. And when I walk out the door, I either say, of course I can do that, because I've done that, I've lived that, or, God, I don't know how to do that. Now I have to research it. So I don't have much time to research. But fortunately, I don't need much time anymore, because most of the styles I have under my control.
Where do you work when you're composing?
I have a studio at home, a separate building at home, which is quiet, and I have a bare bones workstation with an acoustic piano next to it, and the quiet is very valuable to me, and it's very difficult to find a decent workspace these days, when builders don't really build for someone working at home. So that's why we really enjoy living in this area where we have this building out in the back. I've worked at home almost my entire life.
What's your process for writing? Do you have any rituals that you always do or anything?
Sorry, I digress.
Do you always have a cup of coffee with you or something like that?
I don't drink coffee.
No coffee.
No coffee, no caffeine. I don't know how I've gotten through all these years being a Scandinavian with no caffeine. Isn't that terrible? Once I start the process, it starts with a bunch of either mechanical or electrical processes first. I have to transfer all of the cue information into Pro Tools, and I have to transfer all of the cue information, the timing information, into a program called the Auricle, A-U-R-I-C-L-E, which is a time processing program which generates the clicks and or the streamers in the studio. And usually the music editor does that, but I have that as part of my compositional process, so I do all the clicks and the streamers by myself. And once I get all of that stuff set up, then I can actually take a look at the spotting notes and the timing notes and find out what needs to be done for the picture that I've just loaded on the computer. And I just start from the top. And sometimes I go from the top and just go straight through cue by cue by cue. But more oftentimes I will start with, because I'm such a coward, I start with something easy first. And then maybe when I lick that, something for solo harp. Whew, took me 2 bars to do that, you know. Maybe I'll advance on to something more difficult, you know, like a 4-measure piece for 4 instruments. The point being that what happens is that it starts the adrenaline flowing, and it gets me fired up and gets me in the groove to really figure out what I have to do. If I start with something that's difficult, it's really hard to get going. So I just take the coward's way out, you know. I just start easy, and then we just kind of mosey along. And you know, I've got somebody who sits on my shoulder up here, looking after me, taking care of me, and we just kind of just let it roll along and do this one and do that one, and so I skip around a lot.
How do you know when a piece is finished?
When I can say that's it. And normally, when that's it, the score is printed, emailed down to the copying office. I never look at it again, because I find that especially young composers have a situation by which they may be working on 2 and 3 and 4 cues at the same time, and the only thing that it does from my perspective is that it muddles the focus. To me, it's more important to pick one, work on it, do it, finish it, ship it, and then never look at it again, because now you have nothing clearing up your brain. You're starting totally fresh. And we do the same thing, starting all over again, and do that piece by piece by piece. If I have to look back at something for reference purposes, that's one thing. I can do that and grab something that I've written in the front half of the show and it's occurring again in the back half of the show. Then I can copy and paste that and do whatever I have to do to manipulate it. But in general, it's do it, ship it.
Have you ever received any notes from the network on music?
Not a thing. I'm lucky.
In any show that you've ever worked on?
Not a thing.
That's great.
Yeah, I'm lucky.
Are you ever on the set of a series?
Well, in The Simpsons, of course, there is no set,
Right.
except for the cast recordings. And I go to the cast recordings every once in a while. Yardley Smith likes me to be there when she's recording a song, because I give her encouragement of the kind she needs. In 534 shows, I've never ever gone to a table read. I can't believe I'm saying that. One of these days, that's going to be my goal. I really need to do that. But for some reason, it's just when the table reads are on Thursday and I'm scoring on Friday, you probably know why I don't go to the table reads. You know, because I can't dilute my adrenaline push that's going through Thursdays up to Fridays. I have to pick my battles, and my battle is not to interfere with that.
How has the advent of digital music affected your work?
Several years ago now, it seems like it was only yesterday, but several years ago now, The Simpsons said that they wanted to go all digital in the production itself. And at that point, I was using Apple's Final Cut Pro, and that was my software of choice to be able to compose and record on or whatever. And so that was incompatible with everybody else who was going to switch to Pro Tools. And I didn't know a thing about Pro Tools. I was scared to death that I was not going to be able to figure this out in the time they were giving me, because what happened is they made the switch right in the middle of a season of all, if you can imagine that, and made everybody switch over to Pro Tools and digital right in the middle of a season. And it's like I was ready to kill him, because it's not an easy for an old guy like me, But we did it, made it work. The music itself, I don't think that you can really call digital. The music is still analog in the way it's recorded, the way it comes through the mics, the way it comes into Pro Tools. But once it goes into Pro Tools, it's converted from analog to digital, and it's going to be in the digital medium from that point on.
So was there something before Final Cut and Pro Tools that was used?
Let's see. Now you're really taking me back.
Do you know how it was all cut together, kind of when you first started in the industry?
Tape, yeah. And we used to record on multiple mediums for backup purposes. We would record on half-inch 4-track. We'd record on quarter-inch 2-track as a backup for me, for all my stuff. We'd record on sometimes 24-track when we did the songs. We'd record on DAT tape. And we record on, what was the Akai? The Akai medium. That was 8-track Akai, right? I think. We had a lot of recording issues going on, so that when the engineer would say, okay, you guys ready to go? Take number such and such. And then he'd have to make sure that the record buttons were pressed on all these machines at the same time and let it run. And then if the take was no good, we would then back everything up and start anew. The process was very slow.
So how do you think the business of scoring has changed then through all these different technologies?
Well, it's gotten faster. There's no question about that. There's a number that I like to quote. From the beginning of the series, we kept consecutive take numbers in the recording studio with all the music cues. And we just passed number, was it 37,500? Take number 37,500.
Wow.
It's crazy. It's just crazy,
Yep.
And when the engineer slates the take, he will use the entire number. He'll say, take number 37,500. Here we go.
Wow. So we just have a few summing up questions now.
I got a lot to say yet.
Oh, well, we'll keep talking
I'm sorry.
then.
No, I'm kidding.
We'll keep talking. Overall, what role does a musical score play in a TV production?
The score is as important as the actors. The score serves another role that's equal to the actors.
And what is that role?
It is presenting the picture with the proper emotional content for the viewer.
And what is the most important thing to remember when you're composing a theme song?
The pay is great. I'm just saying. Let's see, the most important thing. Well, the ideal for composing a theme song is that it's supposed to continually remind the viewer of the substance that's going on within the body of the episodes, week after week after week. And it's supposed to be something that will ID for the listener when that program comes around. Hopefully that the theme is recognizable. We were just watching Newsroom last night, where Tommy Newman did the theme song for it, and it's really a nice piece of music, and it's very apropos to the program, and it's very identifiable, whereas if you're sitting in the kitchen having dinner and you hear this theme song come on, you know immediately what the show is, which is the point of doing this, you know? It's to get people to come in and watch, because that's what keeps you on the air, when people come in and watch. But they have to be told sometimes, well, should we leave our kitchen and our fabulous lasagna in there, or go and watch the show, you know?
Are there other themes or music on TV that you admire right now?
Well, you know what gives me a kick, I must say, is that we're still fans of Hawaii Five-0. And the theme song for Hawaii Five-0 is absolutely outstanding, but it wasn't written now. It was written way back when Hawaii Five-0 first came on, and it was one of the most amazing main title themes. I don't even remember the year that Hawaii Five-0 came to be, but it was many years ago. So you're never going to mistake what program that is when you hear the theme to Hawaii Five-0.
Mm-hmm. We haven't touched a whole lot on kind of the business side of music for television. Can you talk a little bit just about kind of how your contracts are negotiated? Do you get royalties? Do you retain the rights to any of your music?
Fox holds all the rights to my music, Fox Music, which is their publishing arm. I don't own the rights to any of my music for the show. My contracts get negotiated by my agent. That can go very successfully to not so successfully, depending on the emotional and financial climate of the year. What was there was a third one there.
Royalties. Royalties?
Oh yeah, I couldn't skip over that. Yes, I do get royalties. It's my financial pleasure. The Simpsons is shown in 100 countries, all of which pay royalties through ASCAP, of which I'm a member, and I'm a member of the board of directors, by the way. And thank God for ASCAP. It's a win-win thing. It's really great. And so I get royalties for the primetime shows, and I get royalties for the syndicated shows, for all the O&Os, and then foreign as well. And foreign is just an absolute godsend. It's just amazing. And I had no idea when I started this process that you could actually make a pretty decent living doing this. And living's pretty decent, I must say. It's really rewarding.
Do you have a favorite type of music?
I like contemporary orchestral music. I like big band music. I like small group jazz music. I'm a big jazz fan. I love a cappella choir music. That's enough to get my heart started.
Do you have any favorite composers that you feel have influenced you?
I love Prokofiev. I love Bartók. I like Hindemith, Scandinavian.
It's a good group.
That's a good start, huh? Okay.
Is there an Alf Clausen style?
Style?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I don't know. I tend not to think so because I'm so much like a chameleon in my job. And yet I have been told by people who follow composers that I do have a style and that they can identify me whenever they hear me. Now, God only knows what that is. I don't have a clue. I wish they'd tell me, because then maybe I could eliminate it. I don't know. That's a very good question. I can't answer.
What is your proudest career achievement?
That's very difficult to answer in light of the fact that I've been very honored by a lot of people through my career, and wow, that's a difficult one. One of the fun ones was I have multiples, I guess. One of the fun ones was The Simpsons at the Hollywood Bowl, which happened not too long ago.
I think September of this year, 2014.
Yeah. Where we had an 80-piece orchestra on stage at the Hollywood Bowl playing my music and acknowledging me in the crowd.
What was that like?
That was quite remarkable, you know. That was quite remarkable. That was great. Being elected to the ASCAP Board of Directors is a huge accomplishment. I never, ever would have imagined that that would have happened. My friend Tommy Wolf introduced me to ASCAP back in 1970. And he took me to my first ASCAP meeting, and at my first ASCAP meeting were all these amazing composers and songwriters that he would introduce me to, whether it be Johnny Mandel or Morton Gould or the Bergmans, or God only knows what. You know, it was just a huge, huge list of A-class composers and songwriters. And I was just a babe in the woods, so to speak, and I was really stunned by the whole thing and thought, wow, this is something to be chased after. It was very revealing for a kid off the plains.
Do you have any career regrets?
Yeah. I wish that I would have learned how to play piano better, because I'm not a pianist. I was a French horn player and a bass player, and I don't have many piano chops, as they say. I wish I could perform better on piano. I wish I would have studied law. Well, that got everybody's attention, didn't it?
Why is that?
Because negotiations on contracts are insane, and I'd like to be able to say more about that. I wish I would have studied psychology so that I'd have more of an insight into what makes my producers tick and how can I deal with that better.
What advice would you give to an aspiring television composer?
Well, if you're looking for a 9-to-5 job, this is not it, unless I can tell you that I work from 9 in the morning till 5 the next morning. But if you're looking for an easy 9-to-5 job, this is not for you. If you've got the burn for music composition, which when you get the burn, there's hardly anything like it. It's the most fun you can have dressed. Go for it. Just go for it.
And our last question is, how would you like to be remembered?
Oh, oh my. That's a nice guy.
You definitely are. Thank you so much for speaking with us today, Alf. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming out.